Friday night, I want a Chippy Tee. Chippy Tee, Chippy Tee, I want a Chippy Tee. Oh, you keep giving me posh, no, she don't agree with me. I don't want lobster thermidor with raspberry Kool-Aid. It's Friday night, I'm within me rights, I want a Chippy Tee.
Welcome to the Chippy Tee podcast. What is a Chippy Tee podcast? It's your chance to catch up with a video call that happens regularly between me, Tony P at Palm Print, and
Danny D, Flipper Street Pinko.
And this week we've got a special guest. We've got Liz Woodhouse, the embroidery expert. We've been doing a couple of series now on basically different fields. We've done the emulsion guy, and we've done a few other separate specialists. And we thought it was time to dip our toes into embroidery. So welcome to the podcast, Liz.
Thank you very much for having me on. Looking forward to it.
If we could just start by giving a little bit of an introduction as to who's Liz? What do you do? What are you doing here?
So I'm Liz. I've been in embroidery for, all my life, all my working life since I was 19. So 1999, I started in embroidery. And then this year I have decided to set up the Embroidery Academy, which is an embroidery education. So not machine specific, works with any machine, but it's more on sort of the production side, and helping people just get the best out of their machines and really understanding the fundamentals of embroidery.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So what were you doing before
Tony,
that? What were you doing? What was your working life?
Right. Oh gosh. So I started straight out of art college. I had an advert, "Can you draw?" in the Nottingham Evening Post, and I thought, I can draw a bit. So I went along and had an interview at Jeffrey E. Macpherson Limited.
Wow.
A legendary company. The majority of us in the industry started there.
A lot of us started there.
Yeah. John Potter from MHM.
Potter started at
Dave
McPherson's.
Roper.
Roper.
Dave
Wow.
Roper.
Oh, so this is that company.
Yeah, it's like way back. All the guys in embroidery, it's virtually started there. So I was there as a drafter, a trainee drafter, where I would draw designs by hand, 6 times the size. And we'd get artwork. It was way before people providing you with decent artwork. You'd get a sketch on the back of a cigarette packet, and be expected to turn it into an embroidery design. So
I
you
still
pop it
get
in a
them
shadowgraph.
sometimes, to be fair.
Pop it in a shadowgraph, and we would trace it out 6 times the size, and then take it back to your drawing board and use your instruments to produce a technical drawing. That then went on to a digitizing board, and they were called. So we were drafters, and they were called punchers because they would punch holes in paper tapes to make the machines work. It was, really antiquated.
They read a paper jacquard basically, which was just telling it when to do certain things. Yeah,
it did.
And I've seen this.
Yeah, and they were amazing. And guys could read; they could look at the holes and actually know what the design was. It was incredible. So the punchers would who are now digitizers would punch the programs that you'd drawn. They would create that into an embroidery file. So yeah, way back in the day, but great. But it means that I've got a real knowledge of the way that stitches react on fabric. Physically drawing compensations by hand means it's ingrained in you. You really understand that. And then I went on to McPherson's, decided to sell Compicon software. And Andrew Hill from Happy Japan became the salesperson for Compicon, and I became one of their trainers. So I became a digitizer trainer. And then after that, my best friend who I met at McPherson's, Lisa Craddock, who sells Barradon machines now. Yeah. Told you we're all in there. And they went. So Lisa and I decided to buy an embroidery machine. So we went along and bought an embroidery machine, bought a single head, very old single head Barradon machine, with a Maestrogram keyboard. It was not software; it was all on the keyboard.
With the turret.
Trimmers.
Did it have the turret at the front?
It was. It was a turret. It was a beat. It was a beat machine, and it had a turret. No trimmers. Turret head. Little keyboard on the side, and we had that in my garage, and we worked that day and night. That machine. And yeah, it was great. We had a great time. And then we saved up and bought ourselves a 4-head machine. And that's when the business really changed. And we got our lives back because we weren't working this little single head day and night. So we had a 4-head machine and a single head machine in the garage. And yeah, mostly workwear, schoolwear. We had quite a few local schools on board. And we also did some personalisation as well. Probably a bit before, it was way before the internet, way before Etsy and Instagram. We were doing beautiful personalised gifts, but we had no platform to showcase it. Yeah. So we were doing like Tupperware parties, but with personalised clothing and personalised gifts, going around to ladies' houses, hoping that somebody would put their hands up and have a Tupperware, a party for us. So we're a bit before our time really on that, but that had to take a bit of a back seat because our workwear and schoolwear was really taking over. And then a few life changes, divorces.
What was the company
like
called? What was the company called?
It was called L Designs. Liz and Lisa. L Designs. Very
creative.
Yeah, creative. So we had that for about 10 years. Yeah, so we did that together for 10 years and it was great. We just had a fantastic time, loved it. And then a few life changes and then I went to work for Amaya and I was there really for the last 15 years of my career selling embroidery machines, DTG printers, UV printers, print and cut, lots of different garment decoration, anything that was to do with garment decoration. Bit of cornet as well in there as a MySell cornet. So so background is although I'm predominantly embroidery, I do know quite a bit about print as well. And then that led me to Embroidery Academy. So I just felt there was a real gap in the market for proper fundamental education in embroidery. And
there is, definitely, I agree.
Yeah. And more people were coming to me and asking me about, really simple things that it doesn't take a lot to change to achieve the quality that we should be achieving. And there's a lot of really bad quality embroidery out there that could be improved. And I find it really sad.
We don't know what we don't know. So basically, people buy an embroidery machine and they think, okay, I don't have to worry about the digitizing because it's done offshore somewhere. I just plug this little disc in and off I go. And you have to learn the hard way. To basically, the back of the embroidery is much more important than the front of the embroidery.
Absolutely, and just something simple like a bobbin tension, people don't understand, and it's a bit like bobbin tension, a bit like white ink in screen print. If you don't get that right, it's not right, is it? So your bobbin is if you had a design with 10 different colours in it, but at the back it's 100% the bobbin. So if that bobbin isn't working right, those colours on top aren't working right. So it's a very similar to the white ink in DTG printing and screen printing, and people don't understand that they've got to tension it to get that good quality. So
are you of the camp manual guessing and feeling the tension, or do you have one of these fancy digital meters that tells you exactly how tense how tight the thread is?
I actually am a big fan of a tension gauge, and the reason being is because a drop test, which is traditionally what you'd do, if we all did a drop test, it would all be slightly different because of it just would.
Just doing it by feel, yeah.
Exactly. So as much as I can tension a bobbin very well that way, for people who are new to the industry, and especially when there's multiple operators using a machine, if we're all working to a tension gauge, we all know what that number needs to be. So for consistency, I am a big fan of the gauge. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, me too. I'm a big fan of anything that we teach. Give it a number. Don't give it a feel. Give it a number.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
I love the background story of this, and I just want to say that if I ask really stupid questions, it's because I want to. I literally know nothing about embroidery, so I almost want this episode in a way to be an idiot's guide to embroidery in some respect. So if I ask stupid questions, that's because
honestly, there are no stupid questions. And when I do a lot of my online training, when I do a group online, and I always say that there are no stupid questions. And it's just education. We just want to spread the word, really, don't we? So,
Yeah, I have this perception of embroidery, rightly or wrongly, and I'm sure it's exactly the same in screen print or in print in general. But there's an awful lot, a large percentage of embroiderers and printers out there who are buying the machine, plugging it in, and pressing play, and oh yeah, it's stitched a design. There you go, I've sold it. But a smaller percentage who have that understanding and the knowledge, who have been taught it or have gone out of their way to learn it, to apply the fundamentals as you speak about, which is exactly the same in the print industry, the screen print industry. Many of the fundamentals Tony taught me. And maybe, once you get those fundamentals and those basics, the tension on the bobbins, etc., that's when your prints or your embroiders, the detail increases and the colours pop and the feel is incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that's why in an academy, like you say, it's such a valuable tool, because that my perception is that it's missing, just from the perspective of somebody who has to outsource embroidery, because I'm a clueless idiot and I don't have a machine. So I think it could be a valuable resource. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
Danny doesn't have a machine, but is obviously thinking about embroidery. As decorators, as printers, as decorators, we get asked the question, "Oh, do you do embroidery?" And I would say probably 70% say no, but I've got a guy who does it for me, and I do his print, and he does my embroidery.
Yeah.
And we have this sort of symbiotic relationship with usually a local guy that we keep busy. So we're sort of like, we want to know what's the sort of basic things that you need to know before you get into embroidery. As an expert like yourself, what would your advice be to someone thinking about starting an embroidery?
Well, first of all, I think we've got to look at the numbers. So you've got to look at how much are you outsourcing? How much are you spending on embroidery every year? What would it take to bring embroidery in-house? So as much as we're looking at production, I think first of all, you've got to make the numbers work. So ideally, we want to be saving money by bringing it in-house. But then also quality control. You've got absolute control over the quality, which when we're outsourcing, we don't always have that control over the quality. But then also the turnaround time on how quickly does your embroidery react to your orders, and does that need improving? So obviously, when you've got in-house embroidery, you can then prioritise your production. But first of all, actually knowing what your figures are and how much you're outsourcing would then determine sort of the configuration of machines that you need to look at. Also looking at order sizes as well. So if you're just getting one-offs, then you would be looking more at sort of single head machines, or if you're getting multiples of hundreds, then we may be looking at a multi-head machine. So all of these factors really have to be considered when you're looking at bringing embroidery in-house.
What do you find is the most common configuration of heads?
Well, do you know, it's changed over the years. Years ago, the biggest machine was the better machine. But now the smaller machines do seem to be more productive, because our order sizes, people are going overseas for the mass production, and then we tend to be either topping up those orders in this country, like fulfillment, or we're working with bespoke designs for smaller companies, or for personalization. So the smaller configurations of machines tend to be working more in this market that we're in now. So obviously with single heads for any personalization, then configurations of my 4-head machine always work brilliantly, because really when you are looking at bigger production, for instance, if you've got a 12-head machine, you really need orders of 12s, in that, because what we don't want to do is switch heads off. So for instance, when I had a 4-head machine, if I got an order for 10, I'd do 4, then I'd do another 4, that gives me 8. I've got 2 garments, but I've got 4 heads. I either switch 2 heads off, or I do my last 2 on my single head, and then start my production on my 4-head. So we don't really want to switch heads off. So your configuration of orders have to really fit the amount of heads that you've got, if that makes sense.
Is it detrimental to the machine? Is it detrimental to the machine to have, let's say, 4 running and 4 sat switched off?
No, not at all. It doesn't really make a lot of difference. You just the machine is still running. It's just the needle doesn't sew. So all the
All right.
moving parts, they're still moving. It's just
Yeah.
that the needle's not sewing. So it's not like 2 heads would get more work than the other 2 heads. No, it's absolutely
I
fine.
It's just inefficient, really,
Yeah.
because you've got capability
Yeah.
to produce 4, but you're only producing 2. It's like only loading
Absolutely.
a shirt on every other pallet to
Yes,
continue to run.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's what we don't want to do. So I suppose it's you come across similar sort of thing, don't you, with your screen print orders? You know, there'll be times at the end of the order where some of it isn't actually being used to its full capacity. So that's where really you need to look at the order sizes. I used to sell the Melco machines, which were purely modular systems. So they were just single head machines. So you could run them as a multi-head or you could run them as individual machines. So there's lots of different configurations out there to look at. You can run like banks and banks of single heads, or you can run configurations of multi-heads. But really it's looking at what your requirements are. And that's where, I offer that advice as well.
So if you were new to embroidery, brand spanking new like Danny, what would you say the most common mistake you see is? Time and time again, you see this mistake over and over again.
Yeah. Framing up. So people don't actually understand the framing of the garment, getting the tension right in the garment. There's a real art to framing up. So I call it the drag test. So once you've framed a garment, if you drag your nail across the surface of the fabric and there is any movement in that fabric, you're not going to get a good registration. So therefore, fill stitch circles will contract, therefore the border won't fit properly. A bit like bleeding, when you're doing you on your ink.
There's so many parallels to screen print. I love it. It's great.
Absolutely. So it's a bit like choking, but we would put pull compensation on it. So it's just the fundamentals of getting the backing right, choosing the correct stabilizer or the backing for that fabric, and also the movement in the fabric. Because people blame the machine and they blame the design, but a lot of the time it's actually the operator getting that fabric suitable to accept that design and no movement within the.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it, Danny?
Yeah.
Sounds really familiar. So, okay, then, so on framing, magnetic or traditional clamp?
Well, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the magnetic on certain fabrics. If we'd have had magnetics when Lisa and I were running our embroidery company, if we'd have had magnetics, God, it would have taken so much time and effort and worry out of the puffer jackets or, the horse rugs that we used to do, which would drop out of the traditional frames halfway through a design. So I'm a huge fan of the magnetics for certain fabrics. But for your things like your T-shirts and your polo shirts, I still prefer a traditional frame because I can tension it better. I feel when with the magnetic frames, they are good and they do take some of the tension out of the fabric. But the thicker the fabric, it does tend to. So when you've got a very thin fabric like a T-shirt, I feel that the magnets are too aggressive on that.
It jumps really quickly, doesn't it?
Yes.
I'm always frightened of losing my fingers. It just goes like that.
I do feel like the magnetic hoops, anything like a hoodie or above, I would say, yeah, magnetics are great for it. But a thin football shirt and a magnetic hoop, it's just going to grab the fabric too much.
Can the grabbing of the fabric and the hooping process damage or stretch or leave a mark?
Yeah, it does. It does leave it. So it's called a hoop burn. So all it is doing is really squashing those fibres and taking some moisture out. So all we need to do is add a bit of moisture to that ring and fluff the fibres up a bit. And I'm a big fan of baby wipes. Packet of baby wipes on your desk. Packet of baby wipes on your desk. And all you do is, because you're using using a bit of pressure, you're adding a little bit of moisture, but you're adding a bit of pressure as you're going around. Some people spray them, steam them, but it's making the fabric too wet. And we want to get them in the bag, in the box, and out to the customer. When you've got wet garments hanging around, we're holding up production. So, yeah, a packet of baby wipes. Easy.
The first time I've heard that.
No, I had a situation last week, actually, where I put a fresh squeegee blade on, and it was leaving an impression mark. And the customer got back to me and said, it looks like it's been heat pressed, and it's like it's left an impression mark. And I said, don't worry about it. It's just I've had a fresh squeegee blade in, and as it's dragged, it's sort of left these lines, but it'll come out first time you wear it or wash it. And anyway, she sent it back to me, so I had to go through that process. How am I going to get these impressions out? So I bought a little steamer, and I
Yeah.
steamed them all, and that worked a treat. And I also got some fabric softener in a little spray bottle of water, sprayed
Yeah.
them down. I then
Yeah.
ran it through the tunnel dryer. But now
Yeah.
I can add baby wipes to me little trick.
Well,
Never thought of that.
I've been around customers, and they're spraying them, and then they're hovering under a heat press, and I'm saying, well,
Yeah.
you may as well have just printed them.
Yeah,
It's like
too
you're
much
embroidering them and printing them. So yeah, baby wipes are great because and a lot of them now are 99% water anyway. There's not
Yeah,
really any
yeah.
chemicals in there, so they're not going to damage the garment. But yeah, a packet of baby wipes on the end of your desk. And if you don't want, people have said about the sustainability, and they don't want to use the single use. So if you use your backing, your stabilizer, the offcuts, you can spray that with a light mist and use that, and it's the same sort of thing, which was going in the bin anyway. So that gets
Yeah, of
around the
course.
sustainability. Yeah.
They used to call that Vilene. I don't know where Vilene came from. whether
Vilene,
it's a-
yeah, I think it was a manufacturer.
Is it a
Yeah, I
trade
think that
name
was
like Tyvek,
think
which
it
was
was-
made by
yeah.
DuPont? I think it was Vilene. It's a
Vilene.
non-stitched fabric. So it's basically pressed, isn't it? It's not
Yeah.
manufactured. It's pressed.
There's lots of different backings available now, and this is part of the Embroidery Academy, is that we do go over the different backings and why you would use different, or stabilizers, why you would use them for different fabrics. Years ago it was tearaway, and you just put 3, 4, 5, you just kept putting different layers of tearaway for different fabrics. But now there are so many amazing stabilizers, and people do still want a one stabilizer fits all. But really, if you want to elevate that quality, you do need at least 2 or maybe 3 different types of stabilizer, because our fabrics are so much more technical now, aren't they? We've got the 4-way stretch and things like that we were never working with before. So I suppose they've had to produce things to accommodate to these types of fabrics.
How would you categorise those 3 then?
So I would say you've got tearaway. So we've got the traditional tearaway, and we've got one-way tear. I'm a big fan of the one-way tear. And what I would do is say when you tear it, it tears one way but doesn't tear the other. So I cross-hatch a one-way tear, which I feel gives much better stability. So you're getting stability in both directions. Your traditional tearaway is fine for more stable fabrics, but I'd still do prefer the one-way tear. So you've got your tearaways. Then you've got your cutaways. So your cutaways are, obviously you need to cut them away rather than just tear them off. So a lot of the big production, the high production companies prefer a tearaway because you do run the risk. Yeah, for speed. You do run the risk when you are cutting a backing that you're going to cut the garment.
Yeah.
And it does slow down production, but it does give a really nice finish because it's.
I don't know. I've seen some really fast trimmers. Some people who've done it for years and can pick up a pair of scissors and just go, and it's off, and it's so close to the design as well.
Some people will leave it in the hoop and they'll use an unpicker and take it around, just go around with an unpicker. And I'm not that skilled.
No, I'm not.
And,
I cut the garment every time. I cut one in 10.
Yeah. And then, so you've got your cutaways, and you've got different variations of weights. You've got different variations of weights in all the backings. And then you've got your water soluble, or your more, you can have fusible, so you can, iron it on. You've got your sticky backings, water soluble backings, or water soluble toppings. So there's the sort of like the more sort of specialised backings as well. Then you've got your Weblon, which is also a cutaway. But Weblon it's quite a new product, really. It is a woven backing, and it is a cutaway, but it's a very silky backing, so it's really good for anything with lycra or your sportswear, and it kind of moves with the fabric, but it also has a bit of a grip to it. So those very silky fabrics, which have a tendency to move within a hoop, because it's got a bit of a grip, it causes some friction between the hoop and the slippy fabrics. So Weblon's great. That is another.
So it's a minefield, really.
Absolutely. I'd have a great guide for it to guide you through it.
I think it's we have a lot of similarities where we are always looking for the all-in-one ink, the all-in-one adhesive, the all-in-one whatever. And the truth is, to provide a quality product and to provide a variation of different types of products, you're just going to have shelves full of different things. And I guess it's exactly the same embroidery.
Absolutely.
There's not one size fits all type of situation.
No.
But I imagine there are shops who have the cheapest backing on the shelf, the cheapest thread, and that's all they use.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
where that's where they're lacking.
I mean, it's not wrong. When I go around, I'm not going to, I'm just there to advise. If they don't take my advice, it's very subjective embroidery. And as long as you're happy with the quality at the end of the day, there are things to improve the quality and the speed. But, if they want to carry on using their flimsy terro backing, but they're just going to be using more and more of it. The thinner the fabric, they're just going to use and it's a false economy then. It is a false economy.
Well, very, very often you think you're saving money by using the cheaper option, but because you're using so much more of it, because it may even slow you down. It's the same with inks. For cheaper quality inks, they cause problems that slow you down. At the end, if you put your money in a high quality ink, you'll use less, you'll have less problems, etc., and you save money in the long run.
I call it the budget tyres theory. The budget tyres. If you put budget tyres on your car, you think you're saving money, but you're putting them on twice a year. But if you spend more money and put the slightly more expensive tyres on, you only put them on once a year. So it's the budget tyres theory. It's the same with ink. It's the same with a lot of our supplies
in general.
Yeah.
So my major concern, embroidery, I feel like, is something that a designated screen print shop like myself. I'm obsessed with screen printing. I've spent 11 plus years of my life obsessing over it, and I feel like because of that, I feel like I'm an all right printer. But it literally is more than a full-time job. It takes over my life.
I thought you were going to therapy for that, Danny. I thought we'd agreed you were going to therapy for that, and the medication's going to help.
So what worries me is I've always fancied this idea of having embroidery as a side, because I do get asked for caps or the odd jacket, etc. Would it be possible for me to take on embroidery? How much of a learning curve how much time do I really need to sink into it to put out a quality product? Or is it pick up and plug and play?
It's not necessarily, well, it's not, no, there is a learning curve. But if you buy a machine...
I'm so sorry, I've got to just run and answer my door. I'm so sorry.
Literally
2 seconds. I'm so sorry.
Liz, this happens a lot. Usually it's about 20 minutes in and he's a wee. So you're all right.
You're all right.
And he'll just edit it out. So it's a good time to get a coffee or have a drink.
Yeah.
Because Danny will just run away and leave me here on my own while he goes for a wee or he answers his door. But he is a working shop, so we have to forgive him.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You've been jet setting around, haven't you?
Yeah, I've just got back from Texas, so I was in Texas at the weekend and just got back. Then hopefully disappearing off to Europe again next week.
Wow, brilliant!
And then back to California in January, hopefully, all being well.
Fantastic! And
it's nowhere near as glamorous as you think, honestly, Liz. People think it's glamorous. It's not. It's like it's airport, hotel, chemical factory. Airport, hotel, chemical factory. It's not. You don't get to see all the sites. Although on this trip I did get to go see a Formula One. So,
did you?
I was in Texas, and the Formula One was in Texas at the time. I looked; it was only a 3-hour drive away. I thought it'd be a criminal not to go because I'm here. So I did treat myself. It's about the only touristy thing I've really done. Normally you don't get time because you're working, most of the time.
Yeah.
And all you see is a hotel. Have you been keeping busy? Are you staying in the UK? Are you going abroad or? No,
not yet. I'd like to if the opportunity arises. Furthest I've been is Belfast and Dublin. It's the furthest I've been.
Good.
But it's not bad. But now, I mean, at the moment, I'm sort of concentrating on the UK. But if the opportunity arose, I'd be more than happy to spread my wings.
Well, there's definitely
Um,
opportunities. Definitely everywhere I go, there's always an
yeah,
embroidery with a screen print at the same time. It's
yeah,
they go hand in hand
they do,
together
don't they?
really
I
well.
know, and that's what I'm experiencing as well, because I'm seeing a lot more screen print when I'm going around, and DTG obviously. But
Or
yeah,
DTF
I
now.
think DTF. I know it's taken over the world, isn't it? Who'd have thought
It's
it?
yeah, we've had this conversation a lot, me and Danny, on DTF. It is the perfect complement to screen print that DTG promised it would be. DTG is very difficult to narrow down everything. We're constantly looking at, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, and it won't do this. Whereas DTF, that list is quite small on what it won't do. So it's quite
I think it's also that it was the pre-treatment on DTG, which always the external pre-treatment. Obviously, with the cornets, it's integrated, but all the external pre-treatment was just adding so much extra time onto production.
and
And
then
the
you
way
never
that
know
then
you never know what you're going to get until you print it. Then
exactly, and the way that the pre-treatment reacted to that fabric is something that we were able really to control.
Did you go for a wee, Danny, while you were off?
No, I've not done that either yet. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
We've got a cabinet being dropped off, and the guy was going to drop it off today, but Haley told him specifically not to come in the morning because I'm doing this. And of course, he'd been knocking on my door. Anyway, sorry about that.
Don't
All
worry,
good.
don't worry.
Catch me up, Tony. Catch me up.
Well, we were sort of like we were just filling, waiting for you to come back. But basically, it's about your question of how steep's the learning curve. What would it take? I'm interested in the investment side, the money side.
Yeah.
What's the sort of average cost? Okay, so we got Danny here. He's getting some inquiries of embroidery. He's giving a lot away, and he's thinking, I've got some space here. I could put a little machine there. What's my typical investment for, let's say, a used machine?
So a used machine, a used machine. I mean, they would vary from maybe 5,000 up to £10,000 for a single head machine. I would say for a decent quality used machine. A new machine, anywhere maybe between £10,000 and £17,000, again depending on the brand and the capacity and the speed, because we have different needles. Some machines have got 6 needles, some have got 10 needles, some 15, some 16 needle. So again, it depends on the capacity, really. But yeah, I mean, you could pick up a used machine for as little as a decent industrial used machine for as little as maybe £5,000-6,000. It's just, if you buy something privately, you've always got to consider the installation and the training. When you buy it from a dealer, obviously you're going to get them, they will install it and they will teach you how to use it. So, and give you a warranty. So this is where I find, people will buy a used machine off eBay, but then they don't know what to do with it. So it may be worth buying a refurbished machine from a dealer to get that warranty and that support as well.
Okay, Liz, on the spot, favourite brand? Quick answer.
No, I knew you were going to ask me this. I'm not doing it. No, I'm not doing
Well,
it.
you have to. You have to just snap decision.
I can't.
You
I
have
can't do it. I'm
Because
going
you're
to
affiliated.
I'm not, because I can't. Becoming independent, I've got to respect every machine and like my best friend sells Baradin. I used to sell Melco. I'm great friends with Scott, who sells Tajima. I'm really good friends with Andrew Hill, who sells Happy Japan. I can't. I've got to sit on the fence.
I'm the same.
On the fence.
I'm the same. I know all machines and like all machines, but I have a favourite. So you have to have a favourite.
I can't.
It's like your children. You've got to have a favourite child, even though you don't tell them.
Well, do you know, if I'm going to be really honest, I suppose I grew up at Macpherson's. So I grew up at Jeffrey Macpherson, and I'm a Baradin. That's where I came from.
Good,
so
you can stay now.
So I suppose if I really go into my, my foundations of embroidery are with Baradins. I owned a Baradin. That's what I grew up with. So I suppose if I was to say they're the machines that I consider, probably like the Rolls Royce of machines. But Tajima are way up there. They're great machines, Happy, Melco's, SWF's, they're great. They all produce good quality embroidery. But I suppose like buying a car. You know,
It's exactly the same.
an
It's
Audi.
exactly the same. Yeah.
You know, my partner will only buy VW. He's a VW. You know, people will only buy, you know, BMWs. We've all got a preference, haven't we? They all get us from A to B. They all do the same thing. It's just our personal preference. So, to be honest, machine-wise, it does matter which machine you buy because stitch quality does count. But you could give the best machine the worst design in the world with an operator who doesn't know what they're doing, and it doesn't really matter what machine you've got because you know it's down to that the way that the operator understands the machine and understands framing and all of that fundamentals. Really,
one of my favourite phrases is at the end of the dryer. I can't tell which machine this got printed on. I can't tell if it was a Rock, an MHM, an M&R, an Anatole. I have no idea. Because it is a printed shirt, and it's all down to the operator and the environment, basically.
Yeah, and it's absolutely very similar. Yeah, very similar.
So, in very, very basic terms, what makes a good quality design? In my head, a lower stitch count is a less quality design because you're getting those. That's where you start seeing your edges. So. Is it as that simple? I mean, I'm sure it's not that simple, but
no. But it is. You're right. So the lower the stitch count, the more space. So density is a space between the stitches. Right. So if you've got a higher density, you've got a lower stitch count. So what we would say is it gives you a good digitized file will be that the underlays that they've used. So whenever you see an embroidery file run, you'll see almost like a skeleton go down first. That's your underlay. So the purpose of the underlay, at the moment, you've got a hoop with backing and then topping, and they are two separate elements within the hoop. What the underlay does, it attaches the two fabrics together before the top stitching goes down. So again, a bit like your white ink, really. You know, it's that kind of foundation. And so if the digitizer has put the correct underlays for those columns or for the fill stitch, then it's going to give you a good foundation for the top embroidery. So underlays are crucial. Pull compensation. So when we put stitches on fabrics, depending on the stretch of the fabric will depend on how much those stitches pull in. Right. So by adding pull compensation, that will then give you a much better embroidery file. So this is why if you've got a good digitizer, they will always ask you what fabric it's going on to, so they know what type of compensations need to be made to those columns.
Because they have an understanding of the fabrics. We must have the experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's
so
very
if you were
much
to put
like
a design,
our colour separators.
Yeah. So if you were to put a design on a polycotton shirt, formal shirt, and then you put the same design on a beanie, it just would look awful. You've got to tell them it's going on a beanie. Because it's a completely different fabric, a completely different amount of push and pull on the stitches. So yeah, very, very similar to colour separation. Yeah.
Most companies will have two files, where we have one file, one artwork file, and it's up to us to change the press parameters to go from sweatshirt to t-shirt. Most embroidery have two files. They have a t-shirt file and a sweatshirt file, or a t-shirt file and a hoodie file, a beanie or a woolly hat or a cap. They're different files. Same logo, looks everything the same, but like this says, the separations, if you like, the workings of it, the inside breaking down of how the stitches work is completely different according to what substrate you print on, you embroider on. So.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of learning digitizing and doing the digitizing in-house, or send it off to China?
So no, don't send it to China unless you know a very, very good Chinese digitizer. I'm a believer in you get what you pay for, and if you buy a cheap design, you're not going to necessarily get a great design back. So years ago, digitizing was £10 per 1,000 stitches. So your average design, 5,000 stitch design, well, left chest is between 5,000 and 10,000. You were paying anywhere between £50 and £100 for that file. That was when it was all hand done and beautiful quality.
Was it David Sharp?
Was
it David Sharp? Was the only one, I think, in the UK that you could get a good quality punch design from?
No, after McPherson's.
After McPherson's, it closed.
Yeah, David Sharp. So the competition was David Sharp and McPherson's. We were sort of the classed as there were other people. There was Red Tape Designs and Love Devotion, lots of different people out there. But we were kind of the main digitisers for the whole of the UK, really, and abroad. But so yes, years ago, people had to pay a lot of money to get a design created. That's when Wilcom and Compicon and people like that started to sell to, embroiderers, because to pay somebody to sit and digitize was more economical than outsourcing your designs. But as the World Wide Web and everything's become a lot cheaper, we can go to China and India and get these designs done overnight, and they'll be in our inbox in the morning. And to teach somebody to digitize well is a lengthy process. But then for them to take a file and sit and digitize it well is time consuming. I am not a fan of auto digitizing. It just doesn't make the right decisions that a human can make.
Some of the new software will take a vector and digitize it in a click of a button. I think the software you run, Danny, the Corel Draw, has a feature where it just digitizes, and Adobe have just brought something similar out, but I think it's only for visual purposes.
Yeah, and like say, people do use it, but I suppose from my perspective, from a quality perspective, if you just rely on auto digitizing, you aren't going to get the best out of that file. Yeah. So by maybe using it in conjunction with traditional digitizing, you could automatically digitize some simple shapes, but then use the manual digitizing tools to actually really create that fine definition. So I'm not a big fan of auto digitizing. But back to the question of, would I teach somebody to digitize or would I outsource? If I had a really good digitizer, I would outsource, because even for me, if you gave me like a heraldic crest, like an ambulance service badge or something like that, it would take me a couple of hours to sit and do that properly. So to pay me my wages for a couple of hours, it's just not worth it. You may as well outsource it. You can get designs for as little as sort of £5 up to £15
£5 to £10 a design now. Yeah. It's really cheap now, because the labour that they're using is cheaper than ours. That's why.
Yeah. It's just knowing that you've got a good quality digitizer. And the only way to do that is to try them and test them and run them out. And look for things that we're looking for in a good design are minimum amount of trims and minimum amount of colour changes as well, and also having the correct amount of underlay and pull compensation. But if you get a design back that has got hundreds of trims in it, we know that's not going to run well. That's not going to be efficient on your machine.
It's about efficiency, isn't it? It's about using the time the best, because it takes time to stop, lift, cut, move and start again. And excessive colour changes takes time. So it's about logically working out the process of when to trim, when to move to the next area, or when to move to the next colour. It's all about those things. Yeah.
And if you've got a design, if you've got a run sheet back that have got, because it does tell you how many trims were within a design, alarm bells should ring if there is an excessive amount of trims. Because what that does, every time the machine trims, it puts a tie-off stitch, it comes out, cuts the thread, moves and puts a tie-on stitch. So if you're getting a build-up of those little stitches, sometimes it can feel really thick and quite rough on the skin. But also, like Tony said, it slows the production. Each trim can take anywhere between 2 and 5 seconds per trim. If you imagine excessive trims over the course of a month, that really does start to affect the efficiency of the machine and the production levels.
So these things stitch at about 1,000 stitches a minute, Danny. So so when you think about a 7,000 stitch run for a left chest, it could be stitching for 7 minutes, really easy in your head. But then it's on the machine for 12 minutes. You're like, why is it on the machine for 12 minutes? If it runs at 1,000 an hour, 1,000 a minute, and it's at 7,000, it's an easy calculation. But the trims eat up all the time, and the jumping from colour to colour eats up all the time.
Especially when you've got a multi needle machine where like you've got 15 or 16 needles. If you're sewing on needle 1 and then it's got to get to needle 15, the time it takes for the head, even though they're quite quick, but the time it takes the head to go between the needles again, it really slows down production.
So, super basic idiot's guide to embroidery question. A head is basically the number of machines. So basically, you could put, if it's a 4-head, you can put 4 caps on at a
4
time.
garments on. Absolutely,
And
yeah.
each head can have multiple colours. So is it a set thing? Is it you can buy a single colour, a 5-colour, a 12-colour? Or is it just whatever you want?
Different manufacturers have different amount of needles. So if you're looking at more the sort of the lower end, the kind of domestic, semi-industrial, the brother machines, you're looking at 6 or 10 needles. Then you're looking at, the more industrial machines, which have got sort of 12, 15, 16 needles. Usually 15 or 16 needles on a fully industrial machine.
Yeah. So that's colours. That's how many colours you can put in your design.
Colours, yeah.
Is there a ballpark figure that just sort of covers majority of your work? I know for me, the majority of artwork that comes through, I can just about get away with having 6 print colours. Just about. I could do a bit more, but that's more the mechanics of it. I could do with extra flashes, etc. But in terms of actual colours, I can separate a full colour image. And 49 times out of 50, 49 times out of 50, why did I just say 9 times out of 10? I'll do it in 6, basically.
Yeah. Well, years ago, we traditionally, when I was digitising, it was a 6-colour machine. I think our first machine had 6 colours. So you had to just really ideally use those 6 colours, or you were tying on more colours and pulling them through. So, usually around about 6 colours per design. Very rarely will you get anything with a 16 colours, 15 colours where you're using all the colours.
Nobody wants to thread it up, that's why.
Exactly.
It takes a long time to change colours.
Yeah. And most corporate logos, because they've got print in mind as well, screen print or vinyl printing in mind, the colours aren't, too elaborate. But then, of course, we've got things like the colour reel, which then bring, unlimited amount of colours and variations.
How much experience have you got with a colour reel? I was recently at a place with 2 colour reels on a 10-head machine, a 12-head machine, and it didn't get used much. It seemed like it was. It seemed like a good idea theoretically, but not so great practically. What's your opinion?
So I think
first of all, explain to Danny what a colour reel is.
Yeah, I will do. So, Danny, colour reel, we have just a white thread. And then there is a printer. There's a so it's a white polyester thread, and there is a sublimation printer, CMYK sublimation printer.
Right.
You have to digitize specifically for colour reel, and then it works out how much thread needs to be dyed for each colour in which order. So the white thread goes up into a sublimation printer. It dyes the amount of thread you need, and then it pulls it through the embroidery machine. So it's just a one needle. That's all you need.
That sounds
but
really
what you
good.
can achieve is you can achieve blending. So within embroidery, we can't get halftones. We can't get any blending. It's embroidery thread on top of embroidery thread. So you've always got this kind of almost like it's difficult to explain really, but it's not true blending. So within colour reel, theoretically, you can get like rainbow. You can get these sort of rainbow effect.
No, what this is now.
Gradient. You get a gradient.
Gradients. That's the word I'm looking for, Tony. Gradients. So you get gradients within, which we've never really been able to achieve before. So, jury's out. I did used to sell it at Amaya. We sold it, so I do understand the principles of the machine. I think there is a market for it. I don't know why you would want to dye red thread when you've got red on your machine and it's a single colour logo when you've already got your red. I think for fashion, I think for, creativity, for, I don't know, maybe universities and things like that, I think it's a really good tool. Where it sits in production, I think it would be good for when you need to actually produce an exact Pantone reference, which we can't do within traditional embroidery threads all the time. It's a bit hit and miss, really. Whereas within the sublimation printer, we can achieve much closer to the Pantone references that we need to, which we traditionally we've not really been able to hit. So yes, there's fors and against, I think.
As a ballpark percentage, cost of colour reel compared to cost of the machine that it actually goes on. Without quoting anything, and I'm not holding you to quotes, but how expensive is the colour reel compared to a brand new 8-head Baradon?
Oh, do you know, I actually don't know how much I should know how much an 8-head Baradin is, but colour reel. Well, if I do it in single head tones, because it's a single unit,
It is a single, yeah.
it's a single. So if I did it in a single unit of colour reel would be probably 1.5 times machine price. So you could buy 1.5 embroidery machines for the price of one colour reel head,
Printer,
and you would need printer, and you would need one for each head. So if you had an 8-head Baradin, you would need 8 separate colour reel printers.
Oh, wow.
It's a big investment.
Yeah.
Very big investment. Yeah.
I've got this totally wrong. In my head, I thought it was just a machine that sort of sat on the shelf, and rather than you investing in lots of different colour threads, you have this all in one machine, and you just say, well, I need this much blue for this job, this much red for this job. But what it almost sounds like to me is it's almost an attachment to each head.
It is, absolutely.
Then the program says, right, now you need to be printing blue, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's an attachment.
Wow.
They're two separate. You buy your
Expensive.
machine, and then you buy your colour reel that sits on top of it. And if you've got
And
8 stations, you need to put 8 colour reels on if you want full productivity, which makes it super expensive.
Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds a bit...
Yeah.
Not that I'm running colour reel down. I think it's a good thing, and I like the idea of gradients, but the economy of it is very very off-putting. It's very obstructive.
I must admit, when I first went into a meeting with Colour Reel, and they were sort of trying to pitch it for us to sell, I was actually more impressed with the back of the design because there was no trims, and the back was beautiful. It was like, you know, because we're so used to seeing all these little trims and little, you know, and the back was just beautiful and smooth. So I was actually more impressed with the back of the design than I was with the front of the design. But yeah, there's a market. It's a clever idea. Is it going to change embroidery? No, I don't think it will. But it's a
nice addition. It's a nice addition.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about colour, if somebody wants a Pantone colour, how do we match that Pantone colour inside embroidery?
That's where Colour Reel would actually come into it.
If we didn't have Colour Reel, if we were just using thread.
So the thread manufacturers will. There is on some of the thread manufacturers' websites, you can type in the Pantone reference, and then it will give you other options. Usually, it's very rarely that you're going to get it spot on. They're going to, you know, when you type in the Pantone reference, you'll get a couple of options that you can choose from. It would just be impossible for them to dye all of those threads. So within some thread suppliers, they do have the option for you to type in the Pantone reference, and it would then throw up a suggestion.
Because it's like a 3D thread. It does look different from different angles.
And the stitch type.
Straight on, straight on, it looks a certain shade, but then from this side, it looks a little bit darker. So you're basically going to use your opinion on does this match this, and
sometimes you don't even until you sew it out, because you can do a flat fill stitch which doesn't necessarily catch the light, but then you've got a satin stitch which follows the contour of an image, and you're getting reflections on different angles. So it can even look different, same design, but using different stitch types, it can look quite different as well.
I outsourced some embroidered caps, and the artwork had a very specific blue, and the embroiderer you said, "Oh well, we should use this one." And I looked at it and was like, "Are you sure? It kind of looks not like it." And he said, "Honestly, trust me, this will be the closest match." And actually, when I got the caps in person, it was spot on. But like looking at it on that spool, it looked nothing like it. And I guess that is a case of you're looking at a huge bulk of it, but a thin thread. Changes in person.
And also, it depends on what colour it's going on to. As we know, visually, it can look different according to the different colours it's going on to as well. So until you sew it out, sometimes you don't really know.
No. So another little question I had from a little bit going back ever so slightly. We establish a higher stitch count is typically a better quality embroiderer. But does that then cause problems with pulling the garment and puckering and pulling it tight?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's when you say high stitch count, isn't always necessarily the best results, because again, this is why if it's a good digitizer, they will always ask you what fabric it's going into. They will then choose the correct density for that fabric. Because exactly like you said, if it's too high a density, then on a lighter fabric, you are going to get puckering. But then if you've used the correct backing, then, and the fabric is tensioned correctly before you embroider it, it should minimize the amount of puckering. Some fabrics, it's very difficult to eliminate puckering just because of the nature of the fabric, but we can minimize it by using those correct backings and tensions, and that the digitizer are giving you the correct density of design as well. Yeah, there's lots of variables. Right?
It always everything always boils down to applying the correct fundamentals.
Absolutely.
As Tony was drilled into me a million times.
Yeah.
What can't we embroider? What's the one thing that you've said, you know what, I can't embroider that. I can't do it. That's it.
Do you know, I always say, if you can get a needle through it, you can embroider
Child.
it. Hey, I've embroidered myself.
Most embroiderers are missing a fingernail, no, somewhere.
Yeah. If you can get a needle through it, you can embroider it. And we have different thicknesses of needles and different, like you've got titanium needles. So even really difficult fabrics, you can generally try a stronger needle, and generally you can embroider it. But things that are very difficult to embroider, I know certain like horse rugs that have got really like thick, almost like cardboard in the middle, or karate belts, things like that can be quite problematic as well, where they're really, really thick. But again, if you can also, if you know that you're going to be doing karate belts, you can get, on some machines, you can get stronger springs, which will, and then you put a heavier needle in, and it can accommodate having to go through that more sort of heavy duty fabrics. But really, if you can get a needle through it, you should be able to embroider it, because now we've got lots of different clamps and different frames to hold different types. Exactly. So
I always said no to things, and then someone showed me crocodile clamps. I'm like, where have they been all my life? I can do shoes. I can do everything now. I didn't think they even existed. It's if you can hold it still for the entirety of its journey through the embroidery machine, and you can get a needle through it. So leather, I thought, would always be difficult, but you can apparently get leather needles.
Yeah, absolutely. So leather, I mean, people like Aston Martin and Rolls-Royce are embroidering their beautiful leather headrests and, car interiors very, very successfully using the correct threads, correct densities, because what we don't want on leather, we don't want to have a great big hole and then the thread being inside. So we want to really fill the hole with the thread, so it looks very almost like
finished.
Part of the so it's really working with when it's something very specific like that, it's working with the client to do just to get them to understand the correct products, again the fundamentals for their specific products.
So I think I'm taking away from this is how actually embroidery is quite versatile. Well, quite a lot of product options that I've never even considered that you could run away with. To me, it's always t-shirts and hats. T-shirts, hats, and workwear. That's all I ever think of. But actually, there's probably quite a lot of stuff we could go into.
Socks, gloves, shoes, anything.
Bags, trainers,
children,
dog leads, dog collars, pretty much anything. Gifts, teddy bears. You've got all the gift wear, Christmas stockings this time of year.
Wow.
And I think as well, as much as print is amazing, but there are a lot of products like a Christmas stocking that you would really struggle to print on. The fluffy type things. You just can't. You've really got to embroider it. And there are certain products that, embroidery is really the only method of decorating it.
Yeah. Certainly waterproof and or shiny or stuff that's going to repel ink. It can't repel a needle being forced through it at considerable force.
No,
although you sometimes have to re-waterproof. What's your advice for re-waterproofing? So if you have a waterproof jacket and you embroider it, you basically break the waterproofing. So how do you get that back?
You do. So you can buy backings which will then sort of cover the holes, really. I mean, to be honest, in all my years of embroidering, I've never felt the need to do that. I've never worked with such technical fabric, or the demands on their say their line of work has demanded it. I suppose if you're working with maybe the RLNI or somebody like that where they need it to be completely waterproof, then
Yeah.
yes, there are backings that can be heat applied, which then will fill in those holes. So it can be done. Yeah, it can be done.
Yeah, you wouldn't embroider a deep sea diving suit, would you? Because
That's
you
what I
just
was
fill it with
thinking then.
holes straight away.
No, exactly.
Put a sticker on
exactly.
it.
Yeah, exactly. DTF.
So we're creeping up on an hour. I did promise I
Yeah.
won't take over too much of your day. Can we ask you one last question? Unless you've got any more questions, Tony, that we've not touched on yet.
No, I think we've done everything that on my list.
So one last question for me that really is something that I'm quite interested in is, can you sort of tell us a special effect, something that you really like to use in embroidery that maybe you don't typically see so often?
Yeah, I think probably 3D foam, especially on caps, can look amazing. People are quite scared of it, but really, if it's applied properly, just understanding again the fundamentals, which needles to use, the densities to use, it's really simple to create amazing effects with 3D. You can put different amounts of layers under there, but again, it's down to the digitizing. With 3D, we have to use like half the amount of density that we would normally on a garment, so that it perforates all the way around, so it pulls away cleanly. So 3D is something that actually it looks really impressive, but it's actually really easy to apply. So yeah, I'm a big fan of 3D. People are using it more on garments and things like that. Traditionally, it's been used for caps, but people are using it more on garments now. And
Because it's
bags
a bit heavy,
and things
isn't it?
like that.
It drapes really awkwardly on a thing. Have you seen how it's done,
Yeah.
Danny? Basically, you trap a piece of foam, and you stitch into the foam, and then you pull away the bits that you don't want, and underneath the stitches is the foam.
2 seconds again. If it's him, I'm going to knock him out. Sorry, 2 seconds.
It's nobody at door. He really needs a wee. He's got the world's smallest bladder. Honestly, he can do 2 in a 1 hour podcast. I've never seen anything like him. And he goes for a wee before he starts. So
wait till he gets to our age.
I know. Yeah, I've told him that. I said, if it's like that now, you're not going to get through the night. I'm telling you.
My partner has it. I mean, we're lucky. We've got a T5. It's got a toilet in it. But my partner often has to pull over and go in the back of the van.
Do you do much travelling around?
We do. We like to use the van as much as we can, really. Yeah, we do. We love it. In fact, did a job up in the Lake District
Beautiful.
a couple of weeks ago. So I was like, oh, Stu, I've got a job in the Lake District. We'll come up with me. He dropped me off. He climbed Scarfell Pike. And then we got a lovely campsite, not far from where the customers were. So we made a weekend of it. So that was nice.
It's perfect, yeah.
Yeah,
that's how I started. To be fair, that's how I started. Going down to Devon and the coast down there. The customer down there who said, "Come down for the weekend, and I'll put you up in a hotel, and you teach my guys on the weekend." But to me, it was a weekend in the southwest, in Devon and Cornwall. It'd be great. So
brilliant. Yeah.
Are we all done, Danny?
Yeah.
You just went for a wee, didn't you? Really? I mean, when you look at this back, you'll see that I just talked about you having a wee every 2 minutes. So you're all right.
I've not actually had one yet. I've done well. Sorry, so sorry. Very professional.
That's all right.
If I were to go down the embroidery route, I think that would be the thing that I'd like to specialise in and focus on. The 3D caps.
Yeah.
That seems like a market that would fit quite well with what I do.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, and you can achieve some amazing effects. And like I said, it looks really impressive, but actually when you see how it's produced, it is actually quite straightforward. As long as you understand, the fundamentals of it and using the correct needles and the correct thread and the correct densities, then it's a really easy method of decorating a cap. Yeah.
For me, my other favourite special effect on embroidery is applique.
Yes.
I love applique. This is basically cutting out the pattern of a letter and stitching that letter on, basically, to avoid the fill of the stitches you're filling with.
Like
something.
the Gap sweaters. Do you remember the old when you used to wear Gap sweaters?
And sometimes they'll use like a fluffy material.
Yeah.
There's like an effect. That does look cool.
It's usually paired with a laser. So if you pair it with a laser, then you can almost cut your own pieces, lay a tack down, lay pieces on, and then stitch it back on again. It's labour intensive, but I love the effect. I think it's a great effect.
Yeah, that's cool.
There is so So a lot of the sort of the crafters do it. So they'll do things like they'll do mum with baby grow. You know, the baby grows from the children that when they've grown out of them, they'll put like mum and use the pattern of the baby grows. There's a lot of crafters that do that, which is lovely because they've got the time to do it. But when we're talking about industry, then yeah, exactly. If you are going to do mass production, you would need a laser to cut them out accurately. Otherwise, you put the fabric down, trace around the shape, get your scissors, cut around it, then it goes over with a satin stitch and hides all those raw edges.
Yeah.
But it's very,
Takes
very
forever.
time consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You almost want
But yes, it does look lovely.
a plotter or something that does it.
The other
for you.
thing actually that is when you said about the fluffy fabric, that's usually, you know, like the
Chanel?
varsity jackets. Yeah, chenille. So that is actually more of a stitch than an applique. But you can achieve that. Traditionally, it was done on a specific machine that would actually create this effect, this tough effect, using a special sort of kind of Burma thread. But now you can actually create that just using a stitch pattern. David Sharp actually created one for my logo using the A of Academy in my logo, and it's just using your standard threads and your standard machine, but it's like a simulated chenille effect. So even people without those types of machines can create those. That's really clever.
And is it almost like little loops that hang out and then gives it that texture?
It's almost like it's a bit like a crosshatch effect where it's going in lots of different directions. Very, very clever. I haven't digitized one of those myself, I must admit. I've had it outsourced, but yeah, it's very a nice addition if you want to, you know, to try something different, but still using the standard machines.
I've seen one done recently, which seems to be quite popular at the moment, and it sort of baffles me how they do it. And it almost looks like a rope that goes round and it crosses over each other in like a little diamond pattern.
Oh right, okay.
I
think that's a special attachment, isn't it? The thread is not thread. The thread is like a
like
an
cord.
embellishment. Yeah, it's like an embellishing cord.
Almost like a cord. Yeah. So there are machines that will do that. I know Tajima have got a machine. I was at their 30th anniversary day, which was really good, and they've got like a machine that was doing cording and things like that, which was amazing. So it might be that, but also you can achieve those effects again using what we call a special stitch. So it would be like a walk stitch, but a patterned walk stitch. And then you would go over that. We normally go over it in 3, 7, 9 because it has to. So you go 1, 2, 3 and back to the start. 1, 2, 3. So you would create kind of it's called a beam stitch, but a special stitch beam stitch, which can also create a similar type of effect as well.
Very interesting. Well, I've loved this conversation. It's been brilliant. Very enlightening in the embroidery side of things, which I am absolutely clueless about, but a little bit better off now.
Good.
Yeah, well, and we'll wrap this up now because we've eaten an hour of Liz's time already. So first of all, thank you very much for your time. It has been really really educational for both of us. And all that remains to be said is if you want to get in touch with Liz, then you can go to her website, which is
www.embroideryacademy.co.uk.
And there you go. Yeah, you can book Liz's services to come and help you with your embroidery department.
Do you have any socials, Instagram or anything like that?
Yeah, so Embroidery Academy by Liz is my Instagram, and I can't remember what my Facebook page one is. I can't remember. So, yeah, and my email is liz@embroideryacademy.co.uk. But I also do some online training, so I do on-site training. But I also do an online, and I call it a fundamentals. It's a small group, all different types of experiences. But I do a fundamentals, and it's really digging deep and delving into the way that stitches react on fabrics and why and when we would use different types of consumables as well.
Smashing.
Honestly, Danny, so me and Danny talk about screen printing a lot, and one of the words that I use constantly, and I'm trying to drill into Danny all the time, and everybody I try and explain things about screen print is fundamentals. And I
Yeah.
did not prime Liz to use that word
No,
so many times,
no.
honestly.
But it is,
Danny's
isn't
like,
it? It's that.
are they ganging up on me here? We keep saying
It is, it's
fundamentals.
that.
No,
Yeah.
it
And
is
that's
the
what I
basics,
decided
the
to call it.
fundamentals.
Absolutely. I decided to call this little course Embroidery Fundamentals because it doesn't matter what machine you've got. If you've got the fundamentals, you can take that to any design and any machine as long as you've got that knowledge. So, yeah. We must
Good.
be old school, Tony.
I know that must be it, yeah. Well, I definitely am. Okay, so we'll wrap it up there. Again, thank you very much. If you want to know any more, get in touch with me, Danny, or Liz. And all it remains to be saying is thank you very much, Liz.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Great to see you guys. Thanks so much. Bye.
Oh, we haven't had Alcivi.
No,
So, as
have you
tradition-
practiced this? Are you from Nottingham? So you're not far
Yeah.
off. You've almost got it.
Yeah.
So
As you say goodbye, you have to use the full Yorkshire saying, which
famous
is,
Yorkshire.
as Danny explains,
Alcivi.
Alcivi.
Not
are
bad.
you really northern?
Alcivi. Alcivi.
Yeah, I'll see you.
Alcivi.
Yeah.
There you go.
Alcivi.
No, she don't agree with me. I don't want lobster thermidor with raspberry coulis. It's Friday night, I'm within me rights. I want a chippy tea.